Hey all. With the Turbulent Timeways event starting in just 1 week, I thought I'd do a quick video covering how to put together a gear set specifically for time-walking dungeons and raids during the Dragonflight expansion. There have been 3 major changes since 10.0 launched. All borrowed power systems from Shadowlands, that's soulbinds, conduits, and legendaries specific to that expansion, are completely inactive outside of Shadowlands content. That part probably isn't news, but I just wanted it to be 100% clear. Second, most of the borrowed power that continues to work in Timewalking comes from Battle for Azeroth systems. That's the Heart of Azeroth, Azerite Armor, the Essence Forge, and the extremely powerful proc from rank 12 of Rathian's legendary Cloak. If you played during BFA, you probably have a lot of this unlocked already, so it's just a matter of switching things around, finishing up the Visions grind, or farming up some Azerite Armor with decent perks. If you're starting from scratch, don't worry. As long as you're following the right path, you can break into these systems fast and rack up the vast majority of their borrowed power in no time. Later in the video, I'll give a brief walkthrough of which quest lines and prerequisites to steer towards if you're starting fresh. Third, with Dragonflight's release, item levels on loot for most content 1 to 60 has gotten squished, some far more than others. As far as I can tell, max level Shadowlands gear remained completely intact in regards to item level, but anything before that may have been squished so low that it's useless. All of my old gear for Mists of Pandaria is stuck around 40 item level, and since Timewalking only scales gear down and the template from Burning Crusade Timewalking is somewhere around item levels 70 or 80, that means a lot of your old Timewalking gear is probably hot garbage, even in the lowest brackets. Good news, though, is that we can refarm these pieces at any difficulty to get them at their revamped item levels, which are much higher. There are even some Classic and Burning Crusade pieces making the BIS lists, though they're few and far between. Generally speaking, anything item level 100 and up should be fine for most brackets, but figuring out what's changed, what hasn't, and by how much is a bit of an ongoing damage assessment, so I recommend lots of patience if you're trying to determine just how much of your previous Timewalking set is total crap now. Finally, with the revamped talent trees, we've seen a lot of old perks like Azerite armor traits, conduits, and effects from Legion and Shadowlands legendaries crop back up as talents. However, unlike in previous expansions, the vast majority of these returning perks do not stack with their earlier versions. This means one will often override the other, and it's not always the strongest version. It's worth noting that some perks turned talents have all new names, but if the effects are functionally the same, they will not stack with their older versions and will be overridden. Then you have some talents that reuse old names for new talents with completely different effects, and these do stack, but that's only in most cases. If what I'm saying is making you more confused, don't worry. I'll look at some examples later in the video that should clear things up, or I'll at least give you guidelines on how to differentiate what does and doesn't stack. Since breaking into BFA and its borrowed power systems is the most crucial part of getting a Timewalking set ready, I'll explain how to get started and move fast. If you've heard all this before, skip ahead to the time on screen. First, you want to go to a war board in a capital city and pick up the quest to attend the War Council in Stormwind Keep. Complete that quest line, including the Tour of Borealis, all the way up until you're shown the scouting map and told to pick your first leveling zone. At this point, the old prerequisites and skips get a bit tangled up, but I'll tell you what worked for me. First, complete the War Cache. You can send over a bind on account box of war resources if you have some on another toon, or you can just farm them from BFA rares, world quests, treasures, and so on. It shouldn't take more than a few minutes of flying around. Afterwards, you might have to complete the follow-up quests to unlock the mission table and complete the Shadow War mission, which means waiting a couple hours, unfortunately. Now, I can't say for sure that this is the case, but it only takes a couple minutes to get it started, and you'll be glad you did if it turns out that I'm right. Once you're at this point, go back to the Borealis Inn. Just outside, you'll find an Earthen Guardian offering the quest A Dying World. By now, there should be a portal to Silithus in the Borealis portal room, so take that and do Magni's short quest line ending with Infusing the Heart, which gets you your Heart of Azeroth neckpiece. Simply having the Heart of Azeroth allows you to activate traits on Azerite armor. That's referring to chest, shoulder, and head armor from BFA, which comes with multiple rings of unlockable traits. You'll need to level up the rank of your heart to be able to activate these traits on gear from BFA raids, which is most likely what you'll be wearing in Timewalking, usually along with Dragonflight tier gloves and pants for the 2-piece set bonus. However, do not start farming Azerite power to rank up your heart. There's a quest shortly after the Nazjatar intro that skips it all the way up to rank 50, so any effort you put into farming AP before then will be entirely wasted. Meanwhile, head back to Borealis through the portal in Magni's camp outside the Heart Chamber. If Greymane on the ship still doesn't offer the Wolf's Offensive or send the fleet, you may have to complete some combination of these additional prerequisites. Uniting Tiras. Reach friendly reputation with Storm's Wake, Order of Embers, and Proudmoore Admiralty. You can do so by questing a little bit in each of the 3 zones. It shouldn't take long. Once you've done it on one character, credit for these reputations should be account-wide, meaning you should be able to pick up and turn in Uniting Tiras once you've fulfilled the other prerequisites. Then there's Footholds. Complete the Foothold intro quest lines for Zuldazar, Nazmir, and Vol'dun in any order. Each sends you back to Borealis afterwards, at which point you'll be able to pick up another one, until all 3 are done. Eventually, after all of this, Greymane offers the quest Send the Fleet, which sends you into Nazjatar. You'll quest for a few minutes to get to the faction hub Mesomir, and after you've set up a portal network, you get a visit from Magni, which sends you back to the Heart Chamber in Silithus, then to High Mountain for a scenario. After you return, you'll unlock the Essence Forge, and it'll skip your Heart of Azeroth all the way up to rank 50, just as promised, which is enough to unlock the traits on any and all Azerite armor. Sounds great, right? Well, this is where the grind splinters into 3 paths. The first is farming Azerite power, AP, to unlock the nodes for a 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Essence at ranks 55, 65, and 75 respectively. A really fast way to do this is to solo queue for Mythic Island expeditions in Borealis, which you can do by talking to Flynn Fairwind. But since there are so many sources of AP, don't feel forced to burn yourself out on just one. It's also worth noting that there are many increased stamina nodes between and after these essence slots. The second path is getting additional essences for these slots as you unlock them. I'll leave a link in the description for every essence and its source, since it's far too much to list them all here. The third and final path is Rathian's legendary Cloak, but I highly recommend going for this first, since you'll pick up a lot of free essences and a lot of AP along the way. Not to mention you'll unlock the weekly, bi-weekly, and daily grinds necessary to get your cloak to the rank you want for Timewalking. Just be warned, it's a lot of questing, but even though there are a lot of steps, nearly all of them are extremely short, especially at max level. Assuming you take my advice and go for the cloak next, your next step would be starting the Visions of N'Zoth storyline. After activating the Essence Forge, you should receive the quest An Unwelcome Advisor, which sends you to Stormwind. You'll get some quests from Magni and others, but feel free to ignore the quest Whispers of N'Zoth. Counterintuitively, it's not part of the main quest line. Oh, and try not to get distracted by the multiple versions of Anduin, Magni, Rathian, and others walking around the keep. I'm sure they'll fix that eventually. Back in the Heart Chamber, you'll do some quests for Magni and Mother. Again, ignoring the quest A Brother's Help, since that's not part of the main quest line. You'll do some traveling, some NPC finding, you'll run a scenario, then another, then you'll clear the Oldham Assault, then you'll get sent to Kunlai Summit, then to Vale of Eternal Blossoms, then you'll clear the Vale Assault, then you'll do another couple scenarios, and then eventually you'll unlock the Lesser Visions in the region where the Black Empire Assault is taking place. By this point, the questline will have introduced you to all the time-gated grinds for Coalescing Visions, the currency needed to purchase vessels which you consume to enter horrific visions from the Heart Chamber. If my math is right, which it might not be, you'll need to do 11 horrific visions, assuming you don't fail to complete the quest objective during any of your runs, which means you'll need a total of 110,000 Coalescing Visions. It's not as much as it sounds like. Please watch a guide before going in. Even at max level, until your cloak is high enough to slow your sanity loss significantly, you can easily fail a run by getting lost or just screwing up. Better yet, bring a friend with a maxed out cloak who can spend their sanity to repeatedly scrape you off the floor until you get enough upgrades or learn the route yourself. Just be aware that they'll need to bring their own vessel each time they plan to enter with you. Back to the currency needed to buy vessels and enter these visions. You'll get 12,500 from completing the weekly Black Empire Assault, 6,500 from clearing the first part of the non-Black Empire Assault between the Tuesday reset and Friday evening, and another 6,500 from clearing the second part between Friday evening and the following Tuesday reset. Then thousands more a week from doing the daily Lesser Vision in the same zone as the Black Empire Assault. Add in some of the zone quests, some rares, some treasures, and more, and you can get your cloak to the necessary rank 12 in maybe 3 weeks. You can save up the Coalescing Visions or the vessels you buy with them, which means you can knock out all the horrific visions at once if you prefer, rather than doing them a little at a time. The only time gate has to do with the currency grind. Now that I'm finally done talking about the main grind, I'll cover what's left, and that's the simple grinds. The easy way to get a bunch of Azerite armor is to talk to Kiku in the Borealis Inn, and queue solo or with a small group of friends for Raid Finder. Focus on Battle for Dazar Lore, Eternal Palace, and Nyalotha. You can run them on multiple difficulties if you have bad luck in Raid Finder, or if you're just targeting something specific. And you can even wander through some BFA Mythic Zeros for a shot at the Azerite armor from each dungeon's final boss. If you ask me, trying out different armor with the different trait sets is the fun part, but the only thing you have to be wary of is when a trait matches the effect or functionality of a modern talent. As promised, here are a couple of examples. For a Mistweaver Monk, Secret Infusion is an activated stat proc that gives X amount of stat rating in its BFA version, but as a Dragonflight talent, it gives a flat 15% increase. I prefer the talent version, so I avoid taking the trait when it appears on Azerite gear, since they do not stack. Conversely, the Azerite power version of Misty Peaks gives Renewing Mist a chance to proc X amount of haste rating, while the new Misty Peaks talent gives Renewing Mist a chance to proc 2 seconds of Enveloping Mist, our strongest hot. To my knowledge, these two versions of Misty Peaks do stack, because despite the name, they're entirely different effects. The biggest takeaway is read carefully, cross-check Azerite traits with your talents, and make informed decisions wherever you can. You can always reset the traits on a piece of Azerite armor by talking to the Ethereals in your BFA faction hub, but the price doubles each time, resetting only on Tuesday. Also be aware that certain spells were spec exclusive back then, like Rising Sun Kick for Mistweavers and Windwalkers, or Avatar for Protection Warriors. With Azerite armor, you can bypass these old restrictions by selecting spec exclusive traits in one spec and then benefiting from them in another. If I select traits affecting Avatar in Prot spec, when I go over to Fury or Arms, they'll still affect Avatar. You might find some nice bonuses this way. If I can say one more thing about traits, don't underestimate the Inner Ring. That's generally more to do with defensives, self-healing, mobility, and survivability. Impassive Visage and Resounding Protection help a lot, especially if you have multiple across your 3 Azerite armor slots. If you can't find armor with good Outer Ring traits, at least set yourself up to be sturdier than most people with these Inner Ring traits. As for gems and enchants, since item levels on gear have changed, but the restrictions on enchants are still the same, you won't be able to use most old enchants, leg armors, spell threads, or other enhancements on a lot of your Timewalking set. You'll likely be using BFA enchants on gear below 140 item level, and Shadowlands or Dragonflight enchants on anything higher. A few of the unique equipped primary stat gems scale decently in certain Timewalking brackets, but I keep things simple and stick with a full set of +3 stat gems from Burning Crusade. Those are the epic ones, and they're usually cheap in the auction house if you can't cut them yourselves. Finally, there's the matter of unique items, and I'm only going to point at 3 examples since this video is already getting pretty long. The Sentinel's Eternal Refuge is pretty popular because it has 3 sockets, that's about it. Eskandar's Right Claw is great because the haste proc is over-budgeted and therefore overpowered. And Trident of Deep Ocean is just great as a tank weapon if you're a class who can use it. Defensively speaking, of course. Low chance isn't actually all that low. Since we're circling the topic of BIS items, there's a Timewalking Discord that exists, and although I'm not affiliated with them, I can absolutely endorse the work they've done. I included a link to their resources back when I made the Shadowlands edition of this video, a long time ago, so I'll do the same in the description for this one. Even if you decide to deviate from what they have listed as BIS for your class and spec, they've put in a seriously admirable amount of work testing different gear sets and setups, and that makes them a fantastic resource and a starting point for all things Timewalking. So hopefully you found this video helpful if you're looking to build your first Timewalking set, or if you're looking to dust off an old one to use in Dragonflight. I've added links in the description to useful resources, but if you feel I've left something important out, or if you have a general question, feel free to drop a comment and I'll answer to the best of my ability. Until next time, thanks for watching, and have a good one.